Ladies and gentlemen, we could be looking at the biggest Ponzi scheme that Africa has ever pulled off. What are we talking about here? You need to know.
Others include climate change.
As I said before, keep your eye on one thing and one thing only, how much government is spending, because that's the true tax. Every budget is balanced.
Whose effects have trapped many countries in the difficult place between extreme drought on one hand and devastating floods on another. The Honorable Raila Odinga has spoken extensively on the same.
There is no such thing as an unbalanced federal budget. You're paying for it. If you're not paying for it through it in the form of explicit taxes, you're paying for it indirectly in the form of inflation or in the form of borrowing. The thing you should keep your eye on is what government spends. And the real problem is to hold down government spending as a fraction of our income. And if you do that, you can stop worrying about the debt.
I personally think the revolution of Africa is going to continue growing and growing and growing and growing. They can't silence us forever, even though they are really putting a silencer on this channel. Please pray for us, because it's not by might nor by power, by his spirit, says the Lord. And once we get the adequate information, all of the education downloaded in that we have to combat this government power pull against the people, because the people kind of took it back, you know. Yeah, you did. You took it back. And now Ruto is demanding and really going to extremes to regain power and control and all the other flossy, nosy, nihilabilification that these government leaders want to impart right now, which most of it makes no sense.
None of this makes sense. But let's go into the other things that don't make sense.
And we're going to go over this now, ladies and gentlemen. So please like, subscribe, and click that notification button so when we get information out, you can get information in. We've missed you all, but I just want to say I did not leave you because I wanted to. I haven't been doing videos because I've been forced to tame it down from, I won't mention any names. But Africa is still on the rise. And one thing, let me respond to and make it very clear to you, because I've been getting a lot of questions, people saying, well, where's Gen Z now? You know, the power's in the consistency, and they're just not there anymore. They're done. They had their moment in the hot sun. They had their 15 minutes. And I have this to say to all of those out there watching, thinking that Gen Z just disappeared. There's a time for peace, a time for war, a time for love, a time for hate, a time for joy, a time for sorrow, as the earth remains seed time and harvest. And lastly, let me just say that a lion never roars while it's stalking its prey. So where's Gen Z? Now, I hope you all don't mind. It's getting a little heated in here, so I need to take my jacket off for this one as we watch and be entertained and educated at the same time. Grab a drink.
Our East African region, which is home to more than 500 million people, rightly considers this moment to be its turn to offer leadership on the basis of the principle of inter-regional rotation. I am encouraged by the fact that more than ever, our region's leadership is alive to the complexity and dynamism of the challenges which form the regional and broader international context of our Pan-African moment. These challenges range from political instability and associated governance issues, conflict and insecurity together with related humanitarian tragedies, cross-border and international crime, including various forms of illegal trafficking in drugs, arms, and persons. Others include climate change, whose effects have trapped many countries in the difficult place between extreme drought on one hand and devastating floods on another.
Here is where it's at. This is where the money is, ladies and gentlemen. This is where the hidden money, if you do not care where your taxes go, climate change is that answer. And why Raila Odinga chose to jump in, why any politician right now wants in on the money, because there's climate change money that needs no data behind the funds given. It has no data. It's got none. It's got a fear factor. It's got a feel-good factor and a fear factor to the people. It is crushing the American economy right now. It really is. And I just need to warn Africa, because this Raila Odinga and Ruto fest and all these other people that you're seeing in that meeting, with even Museveni joined in and a couple others from different countries, it's about the climate change money. It's almost an automatic, we'll give you as much climate change money as you want. As you want. You don't even have to show us where it went, but it's for climate change. Prove it. You can't. Prove that it did anything for the climate. You can't. Guys, you've got to watch this video. I am telling you, you've got to watch this and get the facts and the data on what is going on, why they are power grabbing at this money at this moment, why they need to hurry up and get the IMF and World Bank money right now before Gen Z goes off on another tantrum, or before any of the Gen Zs or African revolutionaries go off on a tantrum saying, wait a minute, leave, don't take any money for climate change. Don't borrow, don't sell our land for a climate change. I'm telling you, we keep going.
To seize this moment, we need an African Union that can coordinate, oversee, and drive important continental agenda in a manner that brings Agenda 2063 onto the fastest delivery track. This will be an AU that is empowered with adequate diplomatic, security, governance, financial, technological, and even ecological leadership, and a management capacity to steer us rapidly beyond the sustainable development goals to Africa that we all want for the benefit of every nation and every African citizen. The feeling that Africa is ripe for this historic moment of radical transformation is shared by all our people and all our friends. Nothing stops us from moving into the necessary gear to claim our destiny, and this is why institutional reforms at the African Union are fundamentally essential. This understanding of the monumental possibilities before us and the urgency of our historic moment was underscored here in Nairobi when, at the close of the inaugural Africa Climate Summit, the continent's leaders announced a new transformative agenda under the Africa Leaders Nairobi Declaration on climate change and call to action.
I can see panic in his eyes. He needs this climate change money. If you want to talk about a corrupt politician's dream, it's climate control money. It is. I mean, it is. You got to continue watching this video. You've got to hear the arguments behind it, not just the side of we need climate change. We hear the argument that goes with it. Please do yourselves this favor. But in all fairness, we'll finish hearing Ruto out.
Among many significant pronouncements, the Nairobi Declaration emphasized the imperative of just, inclusive, equitable, and fair multilateral institutional architecture as a fundamental prerequisite for us to transform our immense potential into inclusive opportunities and sustainable prosperity for all of us. Fellow African leaders agreed at the summit that this would be by enabling our continent to industrialize for the world while also decarbonizing it using our abundant human, mineral, energy, and natural resources. The Honorable Raila Odinga has spoken extensively on the same. To actualize this ambition, the transformation must begin here at home, in our continental institutions. Africa must aim at greater self-reliance and a more pronounced role in global governance. For this to happen, reliable and predictable resources to implement the African Union goals of sustainable development and deeper integration are necessary. To this end, I want to promise Kenya is firmly committed to upholding the Kigali decision and will remain a strong contributor to the AU budget as a pioneer in implementing the 0.2% levy on eligible imports. Therefore, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I know that Honorable Raila not only possesses the requisite credentials, but he is also the ideal candidate to lead the Africa Union Commission.
I get it. You get it. We all get it. Climate, what is it? Climate change now? Is that what they call it now? Climate change? Yeah, the climate's change. I get it. Protect the environment. Yes, everybody wants to do that, including myself. I love the environment. But we still have to understand that it is the biggest power grab and the biggest money wasting machine in the world right now. We don't know enough about it. There's not enough data. Take a listen to Senator Cruz explain it a long time ago, and he's explained it again this year. He explained the same argument and 30 years ago. Please listen to this argument and let me know what you think about this.
Listen, everyone agrees that we need to be good stewards of the environment. We all breathe air, we all drink water. That is a central and important role of government. You know, the question of global warming, I view as a very different question. And I am the son of two scientists, two mathematicians and computer programmers. I believe that public policy in this area should be dictated by the science and evidence. One of the problems in the global warming debate is far too much of the debate is driven by politics and political agendas rather than by the actual science. The satellite data show no significant warming whatsoever for the last 18 years. It's just a steady line. Now, the computer models show this spike, but the actual satellites measuring the temperature show a steady line with no significant warming whatsoever. That is, as Al Gore would call it, an inconvenient truth. I think we should follow the science and evidence, and let's step back for a second. Let's look at it with a bit of a historical view. Remember back in the 1970s, when you had liberal politicians and scientists who were talking about global cooling. They said we're headed to another ice age. And the solution to this coming apocalypse was we needed massive government control of the economy, the energy sector, and every aspect of our lives. But then the problem was in the 1970s, the evidence didn't in fact back up their theory because the world was not cooling. So what happened a few years later is many of those same politicians, many of those same scientists, they repackaged their theory and suddenly instead it became global warming. And interestingly enough, the solution to global warming was massive government control of the economy, the energy sector, and every aspect of our lives. And they had computer models that showed catastrophic impacts. New England's going to be underwater, don't you know? John Kerry in 2009 said by 2013, the polar ice caps will have entirely melted. The Old Testament, they said, if someone comes forward and says he's a prophet, okay, make a short-term prediction and let's see if it comes true. Well, John Kerry failed the Old Testament test for prophets because 2013 has come and gone. And in fact, one of the more striking things, because not only was John Kerry wrong that the polar ice caps have melted, but he was spectacularly, entirely, 100% wrong. And today, there is more polar ice today than there was back then. Not only are they not melting, they are growing. Now, that is a theory that is profoundly wrong. And so you notice what happened. Anyone notice the last, 2-3 years, the terms magically changed? It had been global warming, and then suddenly it became climate change. And interestingly enough, the solution to climate change is massive government control of the economy, the energy sector, and every aspect of our lives. And I got to say, if you are a politician, a liberal politician who wants government power, if that is your driving urge, government power over the American citizenry, then climate change is the perfect pseudoscientific theory. Why is that? Because it could never be disproven. How many of us remember high school biology? Remember the scientific method? You start with a hypothesis, and then you test that. You look to evidence to say, is this hypothesis true or false? And what a scientist does is tries actually to disprove the hypothesis. Climate change is perfect. It can never, ever, ever be disproven, whether it gets hotter or colder, whether it gets wetter or drier. The climate is always changing. It has been changing from the beginning of time, and the one thing I'm confident about, it will change tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And a theory that can never be disproven is not a particularly useful theory. And one thing to understand, you notice the proponents of this theory? What do they call anyone who disputes the facts, who looks to the evidence? They call you a denier. That is not the language of science. That's the language of religion. To say you are a denier, you are a heretic, you are blaspheming. You give me any scientist who is not a denier, who is not questioning facts, that's not a scientist. The whole job of a scientist is to question and question and question. And the response from the politicians, this is, I believe, at the end of the day, about government power, and the consequences are tens of millions of jobs. The National Black Chamber of Commerce testified at a hearing I chaired that the impact of the Obama so-called clean power regulations would cost upwards of 20 million jobs, predominantly African-American jobs and Hispanic jobs, people thrown out of their jobs because of the massive new government regulations. And if you're a single mom, you're struggling to put food on the table. Seeing your energy bills double or triple is the last thing you need, particularly when the economy's been stagnant and wages have not moved. And I don't believe it is right for government to be putting massive costs on working men and women when it's getting harder and harder to make ends meet, particularly when the science and data don't back up their apocalyptic theories.
If you're a corrupt politician, once again, and you need power, climate change is where it is at. You don't have to prove anything, just climate change, right? Just climate change. The people will never see any return on their investment because the money will be gone. And you'll be paid for, or you'll be charged for air. We can charge you now for the weather. Wow. What kind of power is that? We control you're paying for air and weather. What kind of power grab is this? In the United States and UK and in France and Europe and all over the world, those that are letting their governments do this and spend this trillions upon trillions, billions and hundreds of billions here, trillions there, letting their governments do this, and their economy was good, is chipping away at it. It's not so good anymore. It's getting worse. Now, for somebody with a bad economy, a country with a bad economy, to start taking loans on something that the data just doesn't seem to fit, this is the worst investment. This would destroy. It would destroy a poor country if they're already in the red that far. It would just annihilate it. It would give politicians and the elites all the power. That's just my opinion. Just my opinion. I need to know yours. And listen to what Byron Donalds lives about 60 miles away from me. Hey, Byron, how you doing? Listen to what he had to say.
You know, this hearing is a complete and utter waste of time. I mean, this thing is ridiculous. I thought we'd wasted a lot of time here in Congress, and unfortunately for the American people, we do, and this hearing adds to that. We are examining big oil's climate pledges. These are multinational companies, and you're trying to get them to, you're trying to force them to adhere to pledges that the majority party wants them to make about climate change. Can somebody explain that to me? Where this body, the House of Representatives, has the ability to literally bully companies into adhering to a climate pledge based upon a climate accord, which is not even a treaty of the United States, because Joe Biden won't take it to the Senate because the Senate will not ratify said treaty. None of this makes sense. But let's go into the other things that don't make sense. The price of oil is now $90 a barrel, give or take. Instead of allowing producers in the United States to actually go and drill for this oil, mind you, in a much more environmentally friendly way, Joe Biden doesn't want our domestic producers to go get the oil. He wants to go ask OPEC to go get oil. And then he wants to go ask Russia for oil because, yes, we are importing oil from Russia. You know, that country that's now looking at Ukraine. And so he's trying to tell the Russians, we're going to cut off Nord Stream 2 if you go into Ukraine, but at the same time, we're importing oil from Russia. Again, none of this makes any sense. But we're going to hold the oil companies accountable for not holding to their climate goals. You know what the funny thing is? Joe Biden and the Democrats are doing the same exact thing that the oil companies are doing. You see, the Democrats are running around talking about how, oh, we're going to cut carbon emissions by 2030. We're going to be tied to the Paris Climate Accords. This is what we're going to do. It's going to be great for our environment. But in the same breath, we are relying on countries in other parts of the world to drill the oil that we need to keep the lights on, to drill the oil that, for Dr. Mann, he needs to power Penn State.
They have a goal to do that, but I don't
Dr. Mann, if Penn State went to zero emissions today, would you freeze in your office and would your students freeze in their classrooms and their dorms?
That's the silliest question I've heard today.
It's not a silly question because that's actually the one question that makes sense. If you cut off energy, people will freeze. If you cut off energy, economies cannot thrive. If you cut off energy, then what we're arguing about right now with respect to what the big oil's climate pledges will not matter, because every member of Congress, every member of the Senate will have constituents who will be furious because they simply cannot heat their homes at a time where, yes, it is cold outside. And anybody in D.C. knows right now it is cold. Like I said, this is a ridiculous hearing. We should be focused on so many other things, like why is it that the barrel of oil is going to $90 a barrel right now and will probably go higher, and what that means for people who live in the northern states in the United States when it comes to heating their homes. Why have their heating costs doubled in the last year? Why have they gone up? It's because of bad economic policy coming out of the White House. And considering all the decision-making that this White House is engaged in, it's no wonder that they're wrong again. I yield back.
Yep, that's my boy Byron Donalds. Good job. Now, what he's talking about in America is the same thing. The reason why I'm putting it up for those around the world, in Africa and South America and all those places, is you have resources right there in your land. And remember, he said, Joe Biden, on the Nord Stream pipeline, and they blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. They blew it up. How environmentally friendly is that? Then we go buy oil from them. How environmental friendly is that? If they're drilling it over there or over here, it doesn't matter. It's going up into the air. They're making people go overseas somewhere else to get what they have already in their land. So yes, hit Africa. Hit them hard with this. Don't let them go anywhere for oil, or don't let them drill their own oil. There's so much oil in Africa. Africa is pouring with oil. But make them start a new energy. This is a form of colonization in 2024 that is getting so tremendously out of control. Another nonstop to hold on to that power grip of colonization and force people to pay governments to gain more power and more money that goes who knows where, to a politician. Corrupt politician mostly, but the West needs more investors. They need more interest on some loans. They need Africans to make more bad decisions in order to keep the power, keep the people down. These decisions in the climate change would bring Africa and hold them down for more and more debt. As you heard in the beginning of the video, watch what your government is spending. Watch what your government is spending. And if you see them start spending a lot of money on climate control without seeing an investment, not saying people won't get new jobs, a couple here, a couple there, but when you're spending a lot more money than you're bringing in, and this is a long term, then it's not a good investment. But the West needs it. The West needs it because they're already in so deep. They need new investors. They need IMF money. And to get IMF money from Africa, because Africa has corrupt politicians, it'll take some loans out on their land and their people, on the backs of their own people. Got a lot of people. But these are just my thoughts. Let me know yours. And I know that one thing is for certain, that the Lord God, above all, who sits on the throne, is looking down at the corruption going on in the world right now. And he sees the big scheme of it all, big Ponzi scheme of it all. And he needs his people to take their authority to take your authority in where you are in this world. How do we do that? We speak it, we see it. It says, say to this mountain, whoever says to this mountain, be thou removed and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, will have whatsoever he says. Speak and see. Speak it, see it. Love you, ladies and gentlemen. It's beautiful to have you out here. And you're not my subscribers. You're my brothers and sisters in Christ. And I am thankful to have you join us tonight. I want to say thank you very much. One love. Continue rocking. You got this. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.